Today I want to talk about the hormone cascade or the steroidogenic pathways. So what this was talking about is our steroid hormones, which we call our sex hormones. But I want everybody to understand where these hormones originate from, because everybody needs to understand really what hormones are. They're little chemical messengers that our body produces. And as you can see in this chart right here, that it starts with the structure of cholesterol. Up in the left corner here, we can see that cholesterol is the structure, and this is the organic structure of cholesterol right here. And what we are seeing is that all the hormones are structurally made from our natural cholesterol. So when people start talking about reducing cholesterol and they start worrying about being on, say, a statin causing dementia, what they don't understand is that our brain is made of cholesterol and that our sex hormones are made from cholesterol. So if you are deficient in your cholesterol, you can actually become more deficient in what we call our sex hormones, which is estrogen and testosterone and progesterone and all these other good hormones that our body needs to produce everything to keep us vital. So you can see that in the left upper corner that cholesterol is made, and then from there, structurally you go down, you can see progesterone, which is one of our really needed hormones in our body. And so from progesterone, it can go down through our kidneys and adrenal glands into the aldosterone or mineral corticoid. And then if you look over here under cholesterol again, you see pregnenolone. Well, pregnenolone is like the precursor hormone that makes not only progesterone as it goes down, but as you go across, it starts making these other types of hormones like the 17-hydroxypregnenolone, which then is made into DHEA as you go across to the right. And then as you can go down, you can see that it makes all these different hormones that we can measure. But as you can see here, testosterone is really an important hormone for men and women, actually. So men just make more of it than women, but we as women still need a little testosterone as well. And then you can see as we go down to the right lower corner, you have your estrogens. You have E1, which is estrone. You have E2, which is estradiol, which is the most active one that hits the receptors. And that's the one that we replace because it's the one that will make us feel the best and really helps all of our viable tissues the most, is the E2 or estradiol. And then E3 down here is estriol. Now, estriol is the weaker of the estrogens. But we're going to come back and talk about these estrogens in a minute and their metabolites and all the issues that we have with estrogens and such. But if we go over here back to the left side, we can see that cortisol here is made. And this is like our stress hormone that we really need, and it's to keep us that fight or flight going. But if you're always stressed all the time and your adrenal glands are always having to produce a lot of cortisol because of all of our stress, there's a thing called cortisol steal, which when your body's having to take all of these components and make more and more and more cortisol from stress, it pulls away from all of these other good hormones, which we call the sex hormones, DHEA, testosterone, estradiol. And so what we're going to say is that the reason why it's hard to balance hormones is you can keep replacing hormones like estrogens and testosterones, but if your stress level is really, really high and you're having this cortisol steal, it's stealing away from all these good sex hormones, then you're going to have a hard time really feeling good by just taking hormone replacement alone. What this means is you really have to manage your stress so that you can not have to pull away from them so much and have such a difficult time balancing your hormones and feeling better. So though we don't replace cortisol, we can give cortisone, which is really kind of what we call the brakes of our steroids. Is the cortisone is the inactive one that kind of puts the brakes on things. for our body to try to rest. So what I'm going to get at is that if we're replacing DHEA, testosterone, estradiol, then you also need to balance the stress and not pull away with using so much cortisol in your body. So once we are now talking about balancing our stress so that we can easily start saying, okay, we can now start taking the DHEA and getting some better effects from it. We can start replacing testosterone and the estradiols, then we will get a better response with our hormone replacement. Now, one of the things that I do want to say in talking about replacement, we're going to get into more details about all these hormones at some point, but one of the things that I want to say, besides getting our stress under control first, is that yes, you can give the DHEA, and we also want to replenish our adrenal glands with extra vitamin C so that they can heal better and make us feel better. Then we can start replacing these hormones. Now, like I said, the estradiol, the E2, is the most active of the estrogens that hits the receptors and does most of the work. So we want to replace with that one. We don't want to replace with estrone because estrone is what we call the more pro-inflammatory estrogen. And what that means is that you don't want too much estrone because estrone has to be broken down into these 3 different metabolites. You have the 2-OHE, which is 2-hydroxyestrone 1, and then you have the 16-alpha-OH and the 4-OH. Now, what the OH means is the hydroxylated form, which is in the first phase of the hormone detoxification. And these are the pro-inflammatory estrogens that can get us in trouble, like with cancers, not just breast cancer or uterine cancer, but also prostate cancer in men. So you can see here, after you have these 3 metabolites from estrone in the OH form, in the pro-inflammatory phase, if you have a genetic defect in this COMT gene, what we call the COMT gene, that will not allow the 2-hydroxy-OH estrone to break down into the what we call the active or the anti-inflammatory 2-methoxy or methylated estrone, which is the one that our body can get rid of and is like the one that we want it in this form so that we're not staying in the pro-inflammatory form. We want to break it from the 2-OH. We want the COMT gene to break it down into the 2-methoxy, which is the one that's going to be the safer one and get rid of this pro-inflammatory estrogen. So if you have a genetic defect or genetic what we call SNP, and SNP was a single nucleotide polymorphism in the COMT gene, whether you got it from your mom, your dad, or from both sides, it can slow down this metabolism of the 2-OH to the 2-methoxy. And then it also affects the 4-OH, the COMT gene. If you have a defect there, it can keep it in this pro-inflammatory 4-OH, which is really the really bad one. The 4-OH is really more pro-inflammatory out of all of them. And so if we like to check to see, either we can measure your estrone. If it's high, then we can assume that it's not breaking down into the estradiol or that these metabolites are not going into the anti-inflammatory phase. So what we can do is we can take supplements such as broccoli seed extract, or DIM is another enzyme that's made from this broccoli seed extract, or we can just eat lightly steamed broccoli every day to help support this enzyme to break these down from the pro-inflammatory to the anti-inflammatory. So that's why a lot of times we'll put people on that supplement called DIM or DIM or I3C. Or I like to use another supplement that's called Avmacol, which is actually the most potent broccoli seed extract that you can take in a concentrated form, and it's easy to take, and it helps you break these pro-inflammatory estrogens into the anti-inflammatory estrogens and keeps you out of trouble from getting breast cancer, uterine cancer, prostate cancer, and probably other cancers as well. So the reason why I'm going into all this is that we have ways of measuring these hormones. Now you can see a lot of times we'll draw blood, and the things that are circled in red on this chart mean that they can be measured in blood. If they're circled in blue, then that means that they can be measured in saliva. And here's our little chart down here. If they're circled in yellow, that means that they can be measured in urine. Well, there are some that are only circled in yellow here, and that's why we have a test. There's two different companies that I like to use. One of them is the DUTCH, DUTCH, which stands for Dried Urine Total Comprehensive Hormone Test. It's a panel that can measure all of these things, because we can do it with saliva and urine, and we can also draw blood. But if it's in yellow, then we have to use the urine test. And ZRT is another company that I like to use that can measure a lot of these metabolites as well. So if you're concerned about a family history of breast cancer or uterine cancer, or if you have concerns about prostate cancer, I like to do this test to really look to see how are you breaking these hormones down? Where are you stuck? Where are the high levels of these hormones? And what can we do to help support the ones if it is stuck? How can we, we don't want to give extra hormones if they're too high, and especially if you can't break them down. And then do we need to give supplements to help break these down? There's a lot of things that we can do. And that's why working with a provider who is well versed in knowing how to not only test for these things, but to treat for these things and to support these things and supplement if needed, or lifestyle factors is a huge one, that we can look at this whole picture and really get a lot more information out of this. So we're going to go into more about this, but I just wanted to give like a general overview of this steroidogenic pathway and showing you what all is involved in this. It's not just so simple like just going, oh, I'm going to go to the doctor and I'm going to get thrown on hormones. And you have to know the safe hormones, the right kind of hormones, and the right balance of hormones, and what to do to really support different areas. So I hope this helps. I know it's a lot of information, but really what I like to do is just give an overview of this pathway. And you can go over this again, and we can talk about this some more and having some questions and talk about how all these different arrows work. And I hope this little bit helps and didn't make it too much more confusing, but hopefully just opened up your knowledge, because we know that knowledge is power, and I'm here to provide education so that we can all support each other and feel better and get better.